For nearly 2 decades, they have lined our grocery store shelves and ended up on many of our dinner plates. And yet, fears around genetically modified foods persist. Are scientists any closer to proving whether these foods are perfectly safe? Joining us now to help answer that, in our nation's capital, Lucy Sherritt. She's coordinator with the Canadian Biotechnology Action Network. In London, Ontario, Mark Linus. He's a writer and former anti-GM foods activist. And with us here in studio, René Van Acker. He's a professor at the Ontario Agricultural College at the University of Guelph. And Ted Zettel. He's a livestock and grain farmer from Chepstow in Bruce County, and he's president of the Organic Federation of Canada. We want to welcome everybody to the program tonight. It's good to see you all here. We also want to hear from you, our viewers, on this topic. Our producers are hosting a live Twitter chat right now, so please chime in, use the hashtag AgendaTVO, and let us know what you think about tonight's program. Let us just share some numbers with you off the top here. Nick Nanos, the pollster, very fine pollster in Canada, asked Canadians whether they trusted scientists as it related to different sectors of our society. And here's what he found. Scientists who deal in new energy technologies got a mark of 78% approval. In medicine, 71%. In climate change, 65%. But in genetically modified crops, only 45%. And 44% of Canadians reported distrusting researchers when it came to GM crops. 11% said they didn't know. I want to know, let's start, Mark, with you in London, Ontario. I want to know why after almost 20 years of basically dealing with genetically modified foods, Canadians, who I suspect are pretty typical of others around the world, are still so divided over these products.
Well, I've called this the greatest science communications failure of the last half century, which is that the scientific community, having developed genetically modified crops, which have the potential to benefit agriculture and potentially to benefit consumers as well, have failed to win over consumers to their positive advantages. And I think it is distinct from areas where the advantages are much clearer to people, such as in the medical community. It's interesting you make the parallel with climate change because, of course, something like 97% of the world's scientists conclude that climate change is real, and yet there's a substantial slice of the population who disbelieves them. And really, politically, it's the flip side for genetically modified organisms, for GMOs, where there's a similar kind of consensus that GMOs are safe to eat, which is argued and put forward very strongly by the same scientific organizations. And yet you've got the environmental groups on one side saying, excuse me, that you should disbelieve the scientists and that GMOs are not safe, whereas you should believe the scientists and that climate change is happening. And so personally, I try to take a pro-science line across all of these areas and say if there is a strong scientific consensus in an area, whether it's climate change, a medical field, or biotechnology indeed, then a good place to start is that the scientists, being the experts, are probably right, and then let's critically examine the evidence from there.
Lucy, how about you? Why do you think 20 years later we still seem to be so divided about this issue?
Well, actually, in that amount of time, not a lot has changed. There's still actually very little independent science about genetically modified food safety, and this is a major problem, is actually there's not a great deal in the scientific literature to tell us about these different crops, and they do need to be evaluated one by one. And of course in Canada, all of that science, those discussions happen in secret. The Canadian government, Health Canada, and other regulatory agencies rely on company data that's never seen in public, and the entire process that decides for Canadians if these products go to market happens in secret. So even though there's been discussion in the public, the government hasn't responded with any change, and there hasn't been a lot of new science that's been done.
René, your view?
Well, I mean, Lucy's right in terms of the fact that the science isn't part of the public realm. Having said that, I mean, the fact remains that these products do go through a regulatory process, which is rigorous, and so there is testing. And to Mark's point earlier, there is, I would say, there's consensus among scientists fairly broadly that we don't see really compelling evidence about risks to human health, for example. But our regulatory system in Canada does require testing to examine whether there are human health risks and environmental risks. They don't necessarily share that data with the public, but nonetheless, there is a process there.
Ted, would you expect 20 years on that genetically modified organisms would have had more uptake, more acceptance by the Canadian people?
Steve, I think that part of the problem is that there was never a discussion about it in the beginning. So when people who are, in general, increasingly concerned about where their food comes from and how it's produced, when they start to ask questions and they come into the subject area of genetically modified organisms, they find out very quickly that these foods were brought into the system without a rigorous scientific approach. And that's something we should maybe talk about right off the bat, is that the idea of substantially equivalent food was something that was put in place right at the beginning.
Ted, you know what? As soon as you said those words, the producer of this program, Sandra Jonas, said to me in my earpiece, no, we're not doing that now, we're going to wait and do that later.
Okay, we can do that later.
We will get to it, but we've got to go in Sandra's order here, okay?
Well, that's
okay,
fine. So let me just elaborate a little on what's happened in the public realm from what we can tell, is that people are asking questions about food for good reasons, because there are many food-related illnesses that affect everyone. So, you know, just to mention cancer and food sensitivities, people don't have good answers for these things. When they research them, when they go on the internet, they find that the science is very mixed, and rightly so, because they're complex topics. So then they look at it a little deeper and they say, well, you know, maybe this is just something that we really need, even if it's not well known how it affects us, something like chlorination of water, that we need to do some sort of risk-benefit assessment.
Okay,
so they ask what is the benefit, and they find that this is all about herbicide tolerance. Basically, there doesn't seem to be any benefit out there for the consumer. So however small the risk might be, it outweighs these unseen benefits.
We are going to share some more facts here. And control room, we're going to go through these 1, 2, 3 in a row here, okay? Here's biotech crop use worldwide. You won't be surprised to find out that it is in, of course, the United States. They lead the world with 70 million plus hectares of use. Brazil comes second at 40 million plus hectares. Argentina next at 24 million hectares. India, 11 million. And there's us at number 5, Canada, 10.8 million hectares. How about biotech crop use worldwide? The hectares increased by more than 100-fold. If we go back to 1996, just 1.7 million hectares in use worldwide. By last year, we're up to 175 million hectares. So this is growing. And what kinds of crops are grown in Canada? Canola, corn, soy, and sugar beet. Now, Mark, to you here, has all of the technology been as promising as was anticipated 20 years ago?
That's a difficult question, because there was a lot of options which we could see 20 years ago, some of which haven't come to fruition. And it's difficult to distinguish whether that's as a result of negative or scaremongering campaigns by activists, of which I was one back in the day, or whether this is actually to do with problems within the scientific process itself. So yes, probably a majority of the world's GM crops are still herbicide tolerant, which for me as an environmentalist is the least interesting option. You know, I've been working in sub-Saharan Africa, looking at some of the options for GMO crops there, which would have drought tolerance traits, pest and disease resistance traits, and protect the food security of people in very poor countries. Now, that's a very different kind of debate and very different kind of argument to looking at herbicide tolerance on a very large scale in the Canadian prairies or elsewhere in North America. So I think it's important to distinguish that there isn't some sort of monolithic entity of the GMO. We're talking about very different traits employed in very different crops, simply using one or other. In fact, there's many different techniques now, even for creating a genetically modified crop. So it's a very different scientific landscape even from the one which we were talking about back in 1995. Things have changed a lot.
Okay, Ted, let's just follow up. What do you grow?
Corn, soybeans, wheat, and forages.
How many hectares or acres?
About 400 acres.
400 acres. You still speak in, yeah, the old imperial system like so many of us do. Do you use any genetically modified seeds in your growth?
The farm is an organic farm. It's a certified organic farm, so that's
so
strictly out of the question.
You must have people who are in the same business as you, who are your neighbors, who do, though.
That's true.
Do you have fights with them over this?
We don't have fights. We try to manage things peacefully, and so far that has been a possibility for us. Corn is our worst problem because the pollen can travel several hundred meters. Soybeans not so much because they only travel a few meters. The real worry for us is the impending release of Roundup-ready alfalfa, which would make containment completely impossible.
Rene, is his way better than his neighbor's way?
Is it better? That's a difficult question. There are different ways. As an agriculturalist, you know, what I know and what agriculturalists know is that diversified systems, integrated diversified agricultural systems are more robust than those that aren't. Do those need to be organic? They may not need to be organic, but certainly if we want to have robust farming systems, systems that are inherently resilient in the face of climate change, for example, they do have to be diverse and integrated. And organic systems tend to be diverse and integrated, although not necessarily. And so it's not a black and white answer.
As few things are here on this program, indeed.
Right.
Lucy, let me bring you in and ask, because Ted said a moment ago that when you bring alfalfa into the mix, it can be somewhat a scary proposition. And I just help us understand why that would be the case, Lucy.
Well, alfalfa is a perennial crop, and this would be the first genetically modified perennial crop anywhere in the world. And it's also pollinated by bees. So the potential for contamination is really strong, and it's like 85% of all of the GM crops in the world is also herbicide tolerant. It's resistant, genetically engineered to be resistant to brand name herbicides, so it survives those herbicides. So it actually also has the potential to become, you know, a herbicide tolerant weed in and of itself. And most importantly, it's actually not needed by farmers in Ontario, and across Canada farmers are saying they don't want genetically modified alfalfa on the market. But in Canada, our government actually doesn't care to consult farmers, and there's no evaluation done about potential market harm. So our government has actually approved genetically modified alfalfa, and now companies could put it on the market, but there's been a lot of protest from farmers in Ontario, in Quebec, and in the West. So this year it looks like it may not be introduced, but we have this situation where farmers are at the mercy of, in this case, big companies. This is Monsanto's trait, and Monsanto also owns over 85% of all the GE crops sown in the world. So we're beginning to see the character of genetic engineering through our experience so far is actually characterized by the use of herbicides, by the role of big companies, and in the case of alfalfa, as with other genetically modified crops, farmers aren't consulted. So it's caused a lot of conflict and is causing more and more conflict without any change from our government's positioning. This is part of why the debate is still ongoing.
Okay, a couple quick follow-ups, Lucy. I heard you use the expression GM and also GE. What's the difference?
Well, there is no difference really in that common parlance we would use genetic modification or genetic engineering. The Canadian government doesn't even regulate that particular concept. In Canadian government regulation, it's called plants with novel traits and includes genetic modification and other technologies. And part of that is why, as Ted had said, you know, there hasn't been a debate in Canada about the use of genetic modification. In fact, our government hasn't really even named the technology and regulation. So internationally, it's called genetic modification. If we want to be more precise, we could call it genetic engineering, but they mean the same thing.
Okay, and Mark Linus, do you believe, I know you're not an expert on the Canadian scene, but you have a good understanding of the situation worldwide. Do you think that governments in the main have had an adequate debate in their countries about the advisability of introducing either more or less GM or GE food into the marketplace?
I think it's important to distinguish different bits of the debate here. I mean, there's herbicide-tolerant crops which have been developed through conventional breeding, which have the same kinds of traits as we're talking about with the GM alfalfa there. So, you know, you have to ask, are the activists also against that? There's all sorts of GM traits, of course, which don't employ herbicide tolerance. And for me, I think that's where the debate needs to be pushing, because the reason I work in developing countries is potentially to try to introduce insect resistance traits so that farmers don't have to use agrochemicals. At the moment, I'm working with Cornell University on a project in Bangladesh. So the Bangladeshi government is having this debate right now about using BT technology in eggplant. It's called brinjal in Bangladesh, a very important vegetable. And the way that farmers currently control pests on brinjal is to spray with some very toxic chemicals. They don't use any protective gear, so there's tens of thousands of poisonings of farmers every single year as a result of this. The GM brinjal would not need to be sprayed. And yet the activists are still against it because it's been developed using GM technology. And so in fact you've got this peculiar spectacle of so-called environmental activists on the same side as the pesticides companies who want to protect their insecticide markets. So I think this is a more complex debate. We need to talk about what the traits are, whether the traits are beneficial, whether they're not beneficial, rather than talking about the specifics of the technology that was used to design the seeds.
Fair enough. Strange bedfellows in that case. Let me follow up by reading something that was in the New York Times a month ago, and that goes like this. After 13 years, 6 scientific opinions and 2 legal challenges, an insect-resistant type of corn is on the verge of being approved by the European Union. It would be only the 3rd genetically modified crop to be authorized for cultivation in the 28-nation bloc. Lucy, it looks like the European Union is taking a very different approach than, say, other places in the world. How come, do you think?
Well, one difference between the European Union and Canada, and the US for that matter, is that in Europe, as in over 60 countries around the world, genetically modified crops are actually labeled on the marketplace. But actually also in Europe, there's a more rigorous, more transparent regulatory system. So it actually takes longer for companies to get approvals. And in Canada, actually there's no time frame. We don't know when companies have asked for approval, and we don't know what the process looks like except for seeing maybe a 2-page summary after the fact. So there's a lot happening internationally, and the debate is still raging internationally, and there are, you know, some complex issues that actually still are being resolved. And one of these is, what kind of science do we need to evaluate the safety of genetically modified crops and the complex environmental.
Okay, hold off on that thought for a second, because you mentioned labeling, and I want to find out from Rennie, why don't we label in Canada?
Well, I'm going to answer that in a second, but just to the point about the European Union, I mean, I think one important point to clarify is that although it would only be the 3rd example of a crop they're approving for cultivation, they have deregulated a number of GM crops. And they do import quite a number of GM crops to support, for example, their feed industry.
Do they label it?
If it ends up that in the final product there's a proportion of the product that's greater than 0.9% GM, then yes, it would have to be labeled.
Do we label?
We don't label.
Why not?
It's not a requirement. So technically, in terms of our regulatory system, there's no requirement. There's no mandatory labeling requirements in either the U.S. or Canada.
Should there be?
Well, you know, there's a lot of interesting activism right now, especially in the U.S. Not so much in Canada, but especially in the U.S. around this question. What's interesting in Europe is that the Europeans, through their directives and through the regulations, provide choice and guarantee for consumers. So they allow consumers to make that choice. And here in Canada and in the US, we don't allow consumers to make that choice. The one way they can is to buy organic. But of course, that doesn't necessarily mean there's no GM present. What that means is that the system has not employed GM.
There's no GM present in your stuff, is there?
Well, there shouldn't be.
There should be, but there might be, and you might not know it.
Well, it would be very rare, and actually in the trade, people are implementing voluntary testing programs to ensure that there is none.
But you're certainly singing from the mountaintops the fact that your goods are organic, right?
But we know that part of the demand for organic foods is the absence of GMOs. It's one of the whole package of attributes that we offer the consumer.
So do you think we should be obliged in this country to put that label on a GM product?
You know, when something's very controversial and the science is mixed, it seems like a reasonable idea to label it and let people decide for themselves. And you can understand the opposition to this from the vendors of the GM technology, because it would obliterate their market.
Really?
For certain.
Why?
Because people would do their research when they saw it on the label, and they would realize that they would just choose the other one. It would become very close in price because there isn't a huge production advantage in using the GMO seeds. So we could produce basically all the foodstuffs that we need at a very, very small premium, non-GMO, and who wouldn't choose them?
Let me get Mark on that. Mark, first of all, on the issue of labeling, do you think countries that don't put a GM label or a GE label on their products right now ought to?
Well, the first thing to establish is that, I mean, your other speaker there said the science is mixed. The science is not mixed any more than it's mixed on climate change. The science is very clear that these foods are safe. And there is no scientific basis for having a labeling regime because there's no chemical difference between the different products, and there's no evidence at all of any danger. Having said that, I personally do support labeling because I think that what we need is more transparency to try and get through the debate here. And you heard from your opening statement from, I think, Lucy it was, about how secrecy. And this perception of secrecy and non-transparency is one of the things that makes people feel that the genetically modified foods have some element of risk, because if something's being hidden from you, then there must be some danger, right? It sounds logical. So the way you should deal with that, and I've made this case to the companies, I think you need to have full transparency. People have a right to know where their food's coming from, how it's grown, and they need to be able to make informed decisions, because ultimately that's how this is going to be resolved, is through the marketplace.
So why are these companies not voluntarily going along with this?
Because they're scared that their foods will be locked out of the market, as your previous speaker from the organic said. Because there's been, well, 15 years of stigmatization of GMOs, even if it's not based on any science, people are nervous and concerned about it. So if there's labeling, then maybe people wouldn't buy the product. So the companies are all scared that they'll lose market share, or they'll even be taken off the shelves as a result of that. So to get from point A to point B. Point A is where we are now, where nothing's labeled. Point B is where pretty much everything would be labeled. It would be ubiquitous, and people would be comfortable with it. Traveling between those 2 points is the difficult thing for the companies, I think.
I hear you, but I can't remember how long ago it was, but I think restaurants, for example, like McDonald's, put the whole nutrition, all the facts about how nutrition is, nutrition or not their products are.
And but nutrition is a different issue.
Yeah, but do people read them?
Fat, sugar. I think people do. People read calorie counts, things like that. I mean, McDonald's, by the way, was the institution that took GMO potatoes off the shelves. I mean, they made 3 phone calls and stopped the whole GM program for insect-resistant potatoes. This was 10, 15 years ago.
Why'd they do that?
Don't imagine. Well, because they were concerned about consumer backlash because of the activists. So don't imagine that all the big corporations are somehow sort of on the same side here, monolithically pro-GMO. It's not the case at all. They will sell whatever it is that people want to buy. And it's the farmers here who risk losing some of their productivity, because obviously they've become accustomed to using this technology because it's been very beneficial for them. But there's nothing much that consumers see in terms of benefit, and that's really why I think this debate has persisted for so long. Gotcha.
Lucy, do you have any sense about how much genetically modified foods have penetrated the Canadian food marketplace?
It's actually really hard to know. There's an estimation that over 70% of processed foods have GM ingredients in them, and that's because of the types of crops that have been genetically modified. Corn, soy, and canola are ingredients in a lot of processed foods. But actually, the Canadian government, Statistics Canada, for example, doesn't track how much GM crops are grown in the ground in Canada. So we don't have statistics about GM crops in Canada, and then the GM crops that are grown are mixed with non-GM crops and put on the marketplace. And so we see this situation for consumers where people are looking for that information and are overwhelmed by the burden of trying to find out where genetically modified ingredients are, but really they're in packaged foods. There are some now genetically modified sweet corns on the shelves in Canada. We did some testing last year and found quite a bit of GM sweet corn, not only in grocery stores, but in farmers markets and roadside stands. But other than that, other than potentially some GM squash and papaya from the States, there's no GM fruits and vegetables yet. There is a small company in BC that wants to introduce a GM apple into Canada and the United States. It's engineered to be non-browning. Many people don't see that as a necessary or useful trait. And this is the situation. It's mostly processed foods at the moment.
Okay, here's where it gets so confusing, and I suspect people who are on social media following this right now are weighing in on it, and that is, we have 4 experts on the program tonight. You all come at this issue from a different point of view. You all have gained expertise either academically or through research or through growing foods on your farm as well, and yet you seem to be disagreeing on what the science says here. Now, for those people who want to be led to a good decision on the basis of what science says, you're confusing us. So let's go through this if we can. René, is the science clear about how safe genetically modified or genetically engineered organisms are?
I would say for the traits that we have commercialized in Canada, foods that are grown in Canada that are GM, they have gone through a regulatory process. That process has shown no evidence of human health risk or environmental risk. And so
no risk or no risk relative to non-GM foods?
No risk relative to the processes, which is all foods. You know, all commercial crops go through the same process. And so relatively speaking, no risk. And so so the regulators have deemed these crops safe for human consumption. If we look globally in the scientific literature, you know, Lucy's right. In the scientific literature, there's not a lot of literature that looks specifically at whether transgenesis or recombinant DNA technology, or what we consider genetic engineering, is safe or not. There's very few studies. There are some studies, and they kind of are, you know, half and half with what I would say is not strongly compelling evidence, but maybe some evidence here or there.
Let me get Lucy on that. How is it that 20 years into this thing, we still have so little scientific, so few reliably scientific studies, at least that's what I'm hearing around this table here, on this issue?
Well, the reality is that because our regulatory bodies rely on data from companies, those companies actually, in very few circumstances, they don't publish that literature. It's not peer-reviewed science. So it means that there's not a robust scientific literature on this question, and that somehow it's been over 15 years, and only last year did we see, for example, the first study, animal feeding study, looking at the impact of mixed GM grains on animal health, or the first long-term study on animal feeding study, that is, of a GM corn that we approved over 10 years ago. So actually, Health Canada doesn't request specific types of tests. They leave that up to the companies to determine what type of data that they think is needed to demonstrate safety. So in the independent science, we're just now beginning to see some of the more long-term tests being done. And that's after 15 years. But I think it's important also to remember that while the technology, we think it does bring inherent risks, it is very complicated and can trigger, you know, impacts in the organism that could have a health impact, that we need to talk about each GM crop separately, that these are different organisms that are also engineered for different reasons. And so each genetically modified organism demands its own scientific assessment. Mark, would you agree with that?
No, by and large, I wouldn't. I mean, I don't know quite how much science needs to be conducted here, but I mean, if you go to biofortified.org, which is a website run by scientists, you'll find a database of close to 1,000 studies now which have been published, largely about the safety of GM. And there's several hundred of those that are independently funded. And the European Union, for example, has put out a publication evaluating the evidence. It's conducted over 200 or so studies. So, you know, all told, there's a very strong, weighty body of scientific evidence now that there's no plausible risk to human health whatsoever. And that is very clearly stated by the major scientific agencies. So the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences, the World Health Organization, I mean, I could give you a list very long, and it's the same kind of institutions that tell us that climate change is real as well. So my point is that if you're going to claim to be a pro-science person, you're going to take your view of the world from what science is showing to us. You can't say the scientific dispute, because on GMOs that puts you in the same camp as the climate change deniers, and for me as an environmentalist that's not a comfortable place to be. And there's no plausible reason why we should be having this debate about GMOs when it's not applied to other mechanisms for crop breeding. I mean, like you can use radiation mutagenesis, for example, blast the genome of a crop with gamma radiation, cause mutations, maybe one of those will confer a useful trait, and that seed can then be considered organic, so, and not properly studied. So there's no reason why there's all this attention given to the particular technique of the use of recombinant DNA.
Mark Rennie wants a feedback on what you're saying here.
Well, yeah, and it's not that I necessarily disagree with either Lucy or Mark, but I think there has to be an acknowledgement that genetic engineering is a truly novel technology. And it does allow us the possibility, and Mark alluded to that, of all kinds of traits that we could have never dreamt of before in crops and perhaps animals in the future as well. And so I think that recognition is important. And
when you say novel, do you mean novel good?
Novel. I mean, it allows us an endless possibility of what's possible. And our government, for example, Government of Canada, has taken a plants with novel traits approach because they want to be able to capture all of those novel traits. But their concern is the trait, and so they recognize that, for example, producing large molecule pharmaceuticals in plants might be a good idea. It may not be a good idea in food or feed plants, for example, but that's possible only through genetic engineering, and that wasn't possible 20 years ago. So that's a good thing, but maybe we do that in tobacco plants, which never are part of the food or feed stream. I think we have to recognize the novelty of the technology, and I think our government regulators do through that process, in that they want to capture everything. And to Mark's point, they want to capture the possibility of those traits through any means. But nonetheless, GE is a very special technology in that regard.
We have not yet heard from Ted on the issue of, I'm not sure you've read all 1,000 of those studies that Mark just referred to that were on that scientist website, but you do know your own experience of farming up in Bruce County. And what does your own experience tell you about the science on all of this?
Well, I tried to answer this for myself just yesterday in preparation because the science is bewildering for a non-scientist. There's a very eminent body of scientists called the Royal Society of Canada here in this country. And in 2000, in about 2000, the year 2000, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, Health Canada, and Environment Canada asked them to do a review on the future of biotechnologies in food. I read a good piece of that report, and it's a scathing condemnation of the lack of testing. The problem, as I started to...
This was 14 years ago, though, wasn't it?
It was.
Is there anything more recent you've come across?
But nothing was, there was no follow-up on that study. What the Royal Society recommended to the government is that GM technologies no longer be allowed this carte blanche insider entry into the food market by the use of the word substantial equivalence. What that really was...
If you're going to read outdated science, so what do you expect? I mean, you go to the Royal Society of the UK, to the World Health Organization, to the AAAS in the United States. I mean, there are a lot of reputable scientific institutions you could have gone to who'd give you information which is updated to the last year or two, which would tell you very clearly there's a strong scientific consensus on the safety here. I mean, that would be much easier than having to wade through all of this stuff from primary resources.
Well, anybody who's not a scientist, I think, should read that report, because it really does point to the need for transparent, independent research, which has not been done. Actual research that tests the effectiveness of these foods and what the outcomes are.
It has been done, which is why I just pointed you to hundreds of scientific studies which have done this. So
it hasn't been done.
If it's out there, if you want to go and find it, and you don't look at stuff which is 15 years old, then you'll have a better idea of what's out there. And it is there, and you can read all this in the primary literature in peer-reviewed publications. And it'll take a lot of time because there's lots of crops, lots of different traits, and there's a lot of scientific groups working on this. But the information is there if you want to go and find it.
Mark, do we know if any GM products have ever been taken off the shelf of a grocery store?
What, due to safety concerns?
Yes.
Not to my knowledge, no. The one example I could cite is, I think, this was at least 10 years ago. I think there was a Brazil nuts gene which was put into some crop. And it did turn out to have an allergenic potential, and that was picked up during the testing and was never commercialized. So it's certainly possible you could create an unsafe GMO by taking an unsafe gene from a different organism and putting it into a crop plant. So I entirely accept that there needs to be. Okay.
Lucy, go ahead.
There have been unapproved GM crops that have made it into our food system. For example, Starlink corn. There is this problem where actually contamination is meaning that field tests of experimental crops.
I mean, there was no evidence of any safety, actual demonstrated safety issues.
Yeah, absolutely. We like to depend on our regulatory agencies to tell us if products are safe or not. And the issue that Ted raised of the Royal Society of Canada's report is really important because that report was in 2001 and recommended extensive changes to Canada's regulatory agencies, and that never happened. None of those changes happened. And so the Canadian government asks Canadians to rely on them to approve products that are safe. They're not labeled, and yet we see that when the Royal Society of Canada produces an analysis of how our regulatory agency may or may not be prepared for this technology, the government didn't respond, or they didn't make the changes that the Royal Society had suggested. So we have this problem where in Canada and in the US, I would say, our governments are asking for a huge amount of trust from the Canadian public.
Well, let me ask you, do you think mutagenically altered crops should be evaluated on the basis of risk? Should they be approved to be organic for organic growers?
Those crops are evaluated by the Canadian government under the Plants with Novel Traits regulations.
And that's all transparent information, is it? Or is that equally secret and equally scary?
It's equally secret. Actually,
the Canadian government
doesn't.
So why is that okay?
The Canadian government doesn't involve the public at all in this process. And that includes a total lack of information about what's being regulated in Canada, how it's been regulated, where it ends up on the grocery store shelves. And so we have, a really important situation here where the Canadian public is asking for information, has concerns, and is evaluating this technology based on the information they can find. As Ted had said, it's difficult to look for this information, but why would we depend on certain experts in this field when there's actually, a confusing array of information and farmers aren't involved in that assessment? Who are these people who say that they're scientific?
Can I give you another example of potential risk here? I mean, in Germany, 53 people, I think, died from E. coli outbreak in organic bean sprouts, possibly as a result of animal manure residues in this. So that's 50 people killed because they were eating. Hold on. I'm talking about there's different degrees of risk in all of our foodstuffs. And people obsess about the undemonstrated risks in GMOs, and no one ever talks about the risk in other farming systems. There's no such thing as being without risk. It's risky to get out of bed in the morning, it's risky to cross the road. But we have to evaluate these on the basis of evidence, and that evidence can only come from scientific
Mark
studies.
and Lucy, let me jump in for a second because we're down to our last few minutes, and Ted wanted to make a point here about what he's heard so far.
The other element of risk is the ecological changes to the agricultural landscape, which will be particularly evident when and if we release the first perennial GM crop, which persists in the environment without being planted, which has the ability to jump to feral populations. My colleague here from the University of Guelph has written papers on that. It's a huge piece of the puzzle that needs to be evaluated, which won't be evaluated because of our regulatory system.
Okay, with very little time left, Mark, let me ask you this. You were on this program once before and you told us your story of somebody who started out as a huge skeptic on this issue and then after having looked at the science have come around. Is part of the reason that people are so hopeful that this is the real deal is that we've got millions of starving people, maybe billions of starving people in this world who need help, and this represents a solution. And are we therefore cutting corners in order to potentially hope that this is the solution?
I think that's a real danger. I'm not saying that GM is a silver bullet to feed the world's poor, but we have a situation where 2 million children die a year from vitamin A deficiency. There's been a type of rice which expresses beta-carotene, which is what the body turns into vitamin A, called golden rice, which has been in development for a long time, and unfortunately the anti-biotech groups have all campaigned against it and demonized it. So we're not potentially able to use a technology which could do a lot of good in saving tens of thousands of lives of small children because of all of this scaremongering, all of this fear. So let's evaluate GM as any other technology on a case-by-case basis. So what are the traits, what are the risks, what are the benefits, and do we want it on that basis, rather than saying I'm against a whole technology, which is both illogical and I think unscientific.
A fascinating issue, and I'm glad all four of you could make some time for us tonight on TVO and debate it. Thank you very much to Lucy Sherritt, who's with CBAN in Ottawa tonight, Mark Linus, the environmentalist, author of The God Species, coming to us tonight from London, ON, instead of London, UK, which is where we had him last time, René Van Acker from the Ontario Agricultural College at the University of Guelph, and Ted Zettel, whose food I can't wait to try, up in Bruce County. Right, are you near the peninsula or no?
No, quite a ways.
Quite a ways away. Well, we'll find you anyway. He's also with the Organic Federation of Canada. Thanks so much to all four of you.
Thank you, Steve.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.